this is what Overwatch 2 has done. There is still a gap, but the gap is smaller. And I appreciate that because it puts more agency in the hands of the person playing the hero and less in the pick itself. So when I first launched Alpha, I had an immediate notice that there was something different about the way the game was designed, the way the game was balanced. And I even talked about it in the first Overwatch 2 video I made, I believe. Yes. And let me see if I can, if I time changes with Overwatch, and I want you guys to pay attention to this, and I firmly believe this to be true, is that in Overwatch 2, there are very, very few, if zero, hard counters left in the game. In chat, I got this confirmed. So when I noticed this, I noticed a couple of things. I noticed Sombra Hack was reduced in duration. I noticed that crowd control as a whole was nerfed. I noticed things like the redesigns of certain tanks and certain DPS having more flexibility that went outside of their character design. And we get this confirmed, and in Overwatch 2 news release, I want to say, when was it? September 15th, 2022. So right before Overwatch 2 was released, read carefully, with the launch of Overwatch 2, our roster will expand to 73. We have shifted our hero design approach to allow it to have an impact on your matches with a range of different heroes and strategies. This means reducing the presence of specific hard counters to heroes. Okay? For example, in the original Overwatch, especially higher scopes, the strongest way to shut down a great enemy tracer diving into support is to swap over to Cassidy. Now that's obviously a load of crock, but okay, it explains the point. If that Cassidy player was effective enough, the tracer could even feel a need to switch themselves to avoid the hard counter. While Overwatch heroes will each have their own clear strengths and weaknesses, and some heroes will be more effective against others, we believe our game plays better and is more fun with fewer hard counters and a broader range of effective hero picks. A further benefit is having your personal favorite heroes be viable more often. That philosophy will be guiding us moving forward. So then the question is let's look back at what Overwatch 1's theory is. So let's go back. Let's actually get here, really dig way back here to Overwatch 1. Okay, so obviously we're gonna have to try and dial our mental minds back here. Our mental clocks back a little bit and consider what were these heroes originally good at. Now there are certain heroes like D.Va which definitely had nuance and things like that. However, if you look at a hero like, okay, this is all bugging out. Epic Pen does not like Overwatch, so I'm gonna have to shut this down for a second. If you look at a hero like Orisa, what was Orisa's archetype? Now Orisa had a little bit more dynamics than actually most of the tank line. But Orisa was a spam hero. You put down your shield and you shot your gun. Okay? You even used your halt to better enable your ability to shoot your gun. Fortify was often used to allow you to shoot your gun longer. And that was pretty much it. Reinhardt. You group up and push the enemy team. No mobility, no high ground accessibility, no range. You just hit them with your hammer. Sigma, spam, and spam, and spam, and spam, and spam. Now, I can hear you guys in the back. Well, actually, Sigma back when Double Shield was a really good brawl short-range tank. That's just because he was ridiculously overtuned. So you could play Sigma in any situation that you want. But optimally, Sigma's strengths were range, and more range, and then range. Winston, no range, only mobility, only dive. Zarya, no mobility, no flexibility, no range, only burn people in front of her. So everything started in Overwatch Design. Let's keep going. Spam, right? CC counter, dive hero, spam hero, brawl hero, spam hero, brawl hero, dive hero, brawl hero, basically was just an anti-dive hero, right? There was no flexibility whatsoever. Spam hero. So you guys are thinking a lot of these heroes were just basically one-dimensional. And I think the original, I don't have any links to proof of this, but I think everyone kind of feels like this. If anyone can dig up maybe some commentary from Overwatch 1 from the devs, I'd love to hear it. Basically, it was very rock, paper, scissors, where certain people counted certain people, which countered certain people, which countered certain people, right? Like, it would be like, okay, a dive comp, if you're playing Zen, you could pick Tracer, and then Tracer would counter the Zen, but then if they picked Tracer, you could go Cassidy, but here's what ended up happening, okay? Here's what ended up happening. What inevitably happened in the pro meta is one of the key aspects of a composition or a specific hero would get overtuned or get overbuffed, or they'd be too strong. And what inevitably happened is then all the heroes that complemented that design then became meta. For example, Orisa. Orisa was really, 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 really strong. Her halt was really, 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 really strong. Her ultimate was boring, but really, 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 really strong. So what happened? Well, not only did you have Orisa that was overtuned, you also had Sigma was overtuned. So chat, who do you think were the heroes being played around these compositions? Do you think people would play Cassidy? No. Do you think people would play Reaper? No. No. You played spam heroes. You played heroes that synergized well with those heroes. And that would change on meta to meta based off of whether Brig was strong or whether Zen was strong. But you played heroes that complemented and worked well with those heroes. You played with Ashe, you played with Hanzo. Sometimes if you're playing with a Brig and like doing a Brawl spam hybrid, you'd go with a Genji or a Tracer. But you played those heroes. That's it. You played those heroes. You could not play Sombra, you could not play Symmetra, you could not play Torbjorn, you could not play Junkrat, you could not play Bastion, you could not play Cassidy, you could not play Soldier, you could not play Reaper, you could not play, even to an extent, Mei was a throw, you couldn't play Widowmaker on most maps, and so you just had over half the DPS cast was just worthless. Because those heroes didn't mesh with that archetype at all. Look at the support line, it was even worse. You didn't play Ana, you didn't play Kiriko. Kiriko would never have been played in that meta. You didn't play Lucio, you didn't play Mercy almost ever. You didn't play Moira. What did you pick? You picked BAP, and only BAP, and nothing but BAP. You had to pick BAP because BAP fit great with Orisa Sigma and the spam archetype. You were smoking crack cocaine if you did not pick BAP. You had to pick BAP, and then maybe Zen or Brig, depending on the circumstances, depending on the map, whether you wanted to push, play spam brawl or more spam brawl, right? So here's the problem, chat, because the obvious answer is, guys, when spam is meta, just go dive. The problem with that is obviously there were problems with like people would make one swap and to completely deny the hero, right? But here's the thing, chat. It wasn't just the fact that you could swap to Brig to counter. That wasn't just the problem. The problem was that you could just make a couple of really basic swaps, counter the original composition that was supposed to be countered that ended up not being a counter, and then everybody played around it. In other words, let me give you guys a little bit of an example. Let's say that spam has the most overtuned heroes. All right? So then everybody tries to play dive into it. But the problem is then like, let's say dive beats spam, spam beats brawl, and brawl beats dive. This is like a horrible, horrible, outdated like thing, but just bear with me, okay? Spam beats brawl, brawl beats dive. Okay, let's say spam is the holy grail because Orisa and Sigma are the most overtuned heroes in the game. Well, the problem is that spam beats brawl, okay, because Orisa and Sigma are overtuned. But then spam also, because the heroes are overtuned, can kind of beat dive too. And then when it can't beat dive, all it has to do is make one or two swaps to where now, instead of paper beating rock, rock also beats paper. So what inevitably happened with this quote-unquote rock, paper, scissors meta is one hero, one archetype would become too strong to the point to where it not only beat the composition it was supposed to beat, it also beat the composition it was not supposed to beat with just a few swaps. And this happened over and over and over again, whether it was double bubble, whether it was with goats, whether it was with double shield, is one composition archetype would have either a synergy or a hero that was overtuned, and then it would, instead of being rock, paper, scissors, it would just rock beats paper, rock beats scissors, and you just have to counterpick it. And you just have to deal with it, and you just have to mirror. So inevitably what always ended up happening is you always would end up in mirror. Now, a lot of you guys are probably saying, isn't that what we already have in Overwatch 2 at the very, 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 very highest levels? Yes and no, because what's changed in Overwatch 2, and this is very important, is the fundamental hero design has made it less obvious, at least less obvious, who the standout fundamental heroes are and what their strengths and weaknesses are. In other words, when I'm coaching a Widowmaker player, there's no question as to what the hero should be doing. But when I'm coaching a Sojourn player, there's a lot more dynamics to how the hero is supposed to be played. It's not so clear. Same thing goes with Sombra. I don't like Sombra's design. I think she sucks. But you have a hero that can not only assassinate better than she could in Overwatch 1, but still retains her identity of denying aggressive tanks and aggressive DPS at the same time. There's dynamics. Mei isn't just a wall you and you die. Mei has reasonable poke. Mei does decent DPS at close range, but can still poke out. Bastion has dynamics. Right? And the DPS cast is the worst one out of all of them. In other words, DPS have maintained a relatively decent amount of their identity. And so basically the failure of Overwatch 1 was you would have one archetype being OP because of hero design, dominating both its strength and its weaknesses and being forced to mirror. Now, that was additionally accentuated by the fact that because there weren't enough heroes and because heroes were not dynamic enough, that one hero would dominate the archetype. In other words, when you were playing a brawl composition, you had to pick Lucio, and that was it. Lucio is the brawl tank. Now, Lucio was horrible in spam, but you had to pick Lucio. There was no option. You could not pick. If you were playing spam, you had to pick Baptiste. You had no option. If you were playing dive, you had to pick Brig. There was no option. And that was the problem. Because we had so many one-dimensional tank, DPS, and support heroes, when you played X composition, there was no dynamics about what you were going to pick. There were no dynamics. When you played dive, we knew what you're going to play. You were going to play Diva. Up until the very, very, very end of the game when Double Bubble was briefly meta after over 4.5 years. You played Diva. When you played Spam, you played Sigma or Orisa. No options there. No Zarya, no Diva, no Reinhardt, no Roadhog. You just did. When you played Brawl, you had to pick Lucio. Can you imagine playing Mercy with a Reinhardt composition in Overwatch 1? Now, there's nothing wrong with strengths and weaknesses, but when those strengths and weaknesses are so black and white, that's when you have a problem. Is spam is poke? Yeah. Spam is just range compositions. Now, let's keep talking here. So you had specific heroes dominate an entire archetype. So, we get into Overwatch 2. Hard counters have been reduced. Heroes have been reworked. So let's consider this. What has been reworked? Diva, pretty much the same. However, Orisa is an example of the Overwatch 2 redesign philosophy. Is Orisa a spam tank or a brawl tank in Overwatch 2? Is she short range or long range in Overwatch 2? Is Ramattra a short range or a long range tank in Overwatch 2? Does Winston have any range in Overwatch 2? Somebody that is very, very clearly a dive tank. Yes. Does Reinhardt have any mobility and range in Overwatch 2? Yes. He has a cancelable charge on a lower cooldown with more control and 2 fire strikes. Zarya has a very, very subtle change where now she can bubble 2 people, which increases her effective range because she doesn't have to touch you for her to have impact on the battlefield. Because before it was 1 bubble, and that's her impact to the battlefield. If she can't shoot anything, that's it. But now she can bubble twice. So she could bubble herself twice for better brawl, or bubble others twice for better spam or dive. Now we look at, this is why I disliked Junker Queen. Because Junker Queen, to me, was an Overwatch 1, the hero design, where she is in your face, and in your face, and in your face, and in your face. The one saving grace of Junker Queen is that she did have a medium range gun and slash knife, right? So there was some range dynamics to her. But for the most part, there's a general move towards more dynamics with a hero. I don't know what these arrows signify, but they signified a movement of a direction, okay? More dynamics. Doomfist, definitely a dive tank, but he has self-sustain, doesn't he? He can also brawl reasonably well with things like AoE punch, right? He can hit multiple targets. Okay? Let's keep going. Range and turret form. Right? Dynamic. Sticky Grenade was less about anti-CC, but do you know what he got? Dynamics isn't just about what archetype does the hero have, but also how complicated is their design. You notice that? Cassidy lost his grenade and gained a different type of grenade, which everybody hates. However, consider his ultimate. Consider his role. Right. And even the 25 HP. So Cassidy isn't just flashbang, flanker, and shoot hero. Cassidy also has to consider how he uses his role, because his role is a significant damage reduction, and it can be very effective as a defensive cooldown. So if you only, and it also goes a little bit further. Now it's kind of a pathetic amount of distance, but it's something. It's not just a reload button, right? His ultimate has significant damage reduction. So now it's not just about, oh, I use an open sightlines. What about High Noon as an anti-dive tool? It's a lot more complicated, isn't it? It's a lot trickier, isn't it? Now, there's some heroes that probably haven't needed much. I think Genji is fine as he is, and Hans is probably fine. But you're gonna notice something. Wall significantly weaker, and freeze is removed, but she does more DPS, so she's more interesting, isn't she? Wall isn't just I wall off tank and burn them down. It's more of a resource split. Reaper has greater mobility with his Wraith, better speed of his TP and Wraith form, so gives him more options of what he can do. He isn't just a tank buster anymore. Sojourn, her entire design is the epitome of dynamics. You have a projectile weapon, a hit scan mouse 2, short to medium range, and then medium to long range, right? But it can still be used at short range. Burst, mobility, horizontally and vertically, an ultimate that accentuates her railgun, and a cooldown that serves as both an offensive slow slash high DPS and a defensive peel tool. What is Sojourn? I would try and describe her as a dive hit scan, but it's hard to say. And even if you could categorize her, there's a lot of nuance to her design. Sombra, is she a CC anti-tank hero, or is she an assassin? Now, everybody hates Sombra, and I agree with you. I think Sombra has been largely a failure in a redesign. However, that's more to do with her, how she feels, and not how the direction has gone. Like I don't know. Sombra's definitely a dive hero, so she's very more binary in her, more one-dimensional in her design, but also within that design, there's a lot of dimensions, right? Similar to Cassidy, right? Cassidy is still, I guess, an anti-dive hit scan sort of kind of mid-range, right? There's nothing. He's not like a dive Cassidy or a spam Cassidy. However, within his kit, there's a lot more nuance. That's what we saw with Sombra. Sombra was just hacks, disables your abilities. EMP, hacks, disables your abilities. That's it. That Translocator. But now you have the seeing through walls with Sombra. You have the damage bonus on your EMP and your hacks. You have the shorter duration of the hack, at least with the shorter duration of the reduced abilities. So you have to be more thoughtful about it. You have the fact that EMP actually does damage now and isn't just about disabling abilities. So even if you can categorize the heroes, and you can do that with most of them, look at Symmetra, guys. Do you see? You know what they've done with Symmetra, right? Faster TP, Why do you think they increased TP speed? Somebody tell me, from what you've learned so far, why do you think they've increased TP speed? Think about it. Why is that a very important change for Symmetra? Well, not just that she could dive, right? So she's not just a hold choke hero. So she can play versus some comps. So she can either go in aggressively versus a range comp and dive their backline quickly, or if she gets dove, she's just not, okay, I guess I died. That's my hero. I guess sucks to suck. You know, there's speed for her. It offers her mobility that she didn't have before because she had TP, but it wasn't available readily. Now, what else has happened with Symmetra? Do you guys know what's happened with Symmetra? What happened to her orbs? What happened to her right click? Faster, but not just faster orbs, which means more range, right? So more range with their orbs, but they do less damage, right? So it's not the AFK burn down main. You actually have to aim, and you can win duels, and you can contribute on a greater scope than Symmetra has ever happened before. And guess what? We can keep going with Symmetra because think about her beam. Her beam now charges up faster and loses charge faster. How is that impactful? Think about it. Why does that matter? It doesn't offer more flexibility in compositions, but what does it do in terms of the mindset? Think Cassidy, think Sombra, right? Right. More anti-DPS supports, right? There's more opportunities for you to burn things other than a tank. There's more decision making about what I should be doing in a fight. Should I be shooting the shield? I can't just maintain a level 3 beam and screw around for an hour, right? I have to actually be thoughtful about who I'm shooting, right? This is the design. This is the design. This is the design. Brig. No more brain dead anti-dive. Bash is more of a mobility tool. Wow, did you notice that? Mobility. If anything in Overwatch, we've noticed a mobility creep, and I'm actually not against that. Zenyatta has a peel tool with his kick. Notice that they didn't give Zenyatta increased survivability. They did give him the 25 HP, but they took it away. But what did they do? They gave him a kick. Now, we could talk about whether the kick is a good use of that or not, but it's a level of padding onto the hero design. And at the same time, what do they do to his Discord? What do they do to his Discord? So they buffed a weak part of him, and they nerfed his Discord from 30 to 25. So do you see what they've done? They've chopped off one of his strengths by a little bit, and they've buffed one of his weaknesses a little bit. So is Zenyatta still a spam hero? Yes. Yes, Zenyatta is still a spam hero. However, he's slightly less squishy and slightly less suppressive at range. And the same thing goes with Brig. Is Brig a good peel hero? Yeah. But she also has some decent mobility now, too. Now, Brig is very weak, right? Zen is pretty weak. And not all of these has been successes. I think Baptiste's shift has been extremely boring, right? It just accentuated what he was already good at, and I think was the wrong direction with the hero, right? But, you know? So we want to avoid polarized heroes. That's not me saying that. That's Overwatch saying it. And my stance on it is that I can see that as long as... Here's what we want to avoid. Here's what Overwatch 1 had, okay? Overwatch 1 had this. Lucio, like this is like with Symmetra, right? Overwhelmingly strong in small short ranges, overwhelmingly horrible in long ranges. Overwatch 2 has made this like this. This is what Overwatch 2 has done. There is still a gap, but the gap is smaller. And I appreciate that because it puts more agency in the hands of the person playing the hero and less in the pick itself. If you play Symmetra well, you can play her versus most compositions. Now, at the pro level, no, but you can play Symmetra versus snipers now. You have a faster TP, you have better range, you could be more flexible. Well, you say you forgot to give Sojourn one of those gaps. Well, Sojourn, yeah, Sojourn is dynamic, but Sojourn is like just, was very good. I don't know where she is now, but Sojourn was just good at both, right? Perfectly equal at both, right? But that's not necessarily the problem. The problem is that how high that both of those were. Now, here's a really interesting point. We've brought up some points with Brig, with Zen. We've brought up some points with DPS. But if you notice, where has the majority of the new Overwatch 2 hero design philosophy been put into? Obviously, we've removed CC from a lot of the heroes like this. But where are more of the dynamic designs placed? Support, damage, or tank? You guys tell me. Right, tanks. Why? Why is that so important? Right, one tank. So if you pick the wrong tank, there is no secondary DPS, or if you pick Widowmaker, there's no second DPS to cover your back by covering some of your weaknesses or strengths in case you get hard countered on rollout. They're the ones who define the engage. They are and not only that, but they're also the strongest heroes in the battlefield, so they identify so many things. So that's why we've seen things like so much effort being put into Orisa and Ramattra and Reinhardt and Winston and Zarya, and all of these heroes have more dynamics than they did before. And this is where it brings me to the last point. So we've talked about the design being potentially a good theory because there's more dynamics, more agency to the player with playstyle. In other words, you're not just a hard counter. You can play the hero better to match what you need to do in each situation. There's less hard-cut black and white archetypes. And okay, here's one other thing before I keep going. This was a great point when I made a tweet about this a little while ago about how having more dynamics for the hero, in other words, when you look at Orisa, what does Orisa have? She has a Fortify that reduces damage and removes her, she cannot be headshot. She has a Fortify that also reduces the amount of gun heat up that she has. She has a Javelin Spin, which blocks all melee attacks and all ranged projectiles from the front, and increases her movement speed, and does damage, and boops back, and increases her movement speed by 2 seconds after it's already done. She has a Javelin, which is a projectile that CCs and stuns, and does more damage if they hit against the wall. She has a projectile gun that has an overheating mechanism that also does more damage the closer you are to the target. She has an ultimate, which does AoE, but is blocked by shields and sucks you in, but then it has a faster ramp time at the 50% mark and fortifies you during its duration. Do you see my point? There is so much to Orisa. So much! And you look at a hero like Winston, you've got a whole new thing to think about with your right-click management and using that at range or as part of combos, and Reinhardt with your double fire strike and your ability to move around and be flexible with your positioning, right? And Ramattra, oh my gosh, there's so much to think about with that hero, right? Right? So we talk about not only is it more fun to play heroes like this where there's so much going on, but also when it comes to balancing, it's easier to balance because there's more factors, more knobs that you can turn that don't necessarily destroy the fundamental core of what makes the hero good. For example, during GOATs, okay, that's not a good example. During Double Shield, when you would tweak Orisa, whether it was her Fortify or her Shield HP, remember back in the day how much they went back and forth on that? And they never really found the sweet spot because that was it. That was Orisa, Fortify, Shield, and Halt, right? That was it. There were no nerfing her gun wouldn't have made any difference. If you nerfed her halt too hard, she would have immediately been trashed here. Immediately. But now you have heroes like this, where if you nerfed her gun, it would have a significant impact. If you nerfed her javelin spin cooldown, it would have a significant impact. If you nerfed fortify duration, it would have a significant impact. Or harpoon is a legitimate important part of her kit. If you nerf that, it would have a significant impact. Or her ultimate. Imagine if her ultimate didn't grant fortify anymore. Right? Now, I'm not saying that Rissa needs nerfs at all, but there are so many ways, creative ways of approaching the hero buffing or nerfing that don't immediately overtune it. Because when you only have one hero of a type, it's very hard to buff or nerf without destroying the core identity of the class. And that's the problem. But now, with Reinhardt, we could buff, nerf his charge cooldown by 1 second, increase the speed of fire strikes by 5 meters per second, and increase Earth Shatter stun duration by 0.25 seconds, and they would all be tangible changes without necessarily reducing or breaking the core design of the hero. Now, we've been very positive. We've been very, very, very positive so far. Let's get to the negatives. In my opinion, the negatives of this design philosophy have not been about the philosophy itself. I'm a big fan of the philosophy. I like not having as many hard counters. I like more dynamics. I love playing Orisa, guys. I love playing Orisa. I like playing the new Winston. I love playing Sojourn, right? There's so much, even Kiriko, right? Who is very much a dive support, right? She's very archetypal, but there's so much nuance with her, the way her weapons work and her Suzu timing and the way you use 2P and the positioning and the fact that you have a wall climb that you can use and her ultimate. There's so much to the hero. It's great. There's so many details. It's not just heal or damage boost, right? This sucks. This hero design sucks, right? They're definitely working at it, but it sucks. Same thing with this hero design. Sucks, right? However, the problem has been that all reworks are not alike, and there just haven't been enough of them. I don't think this hero has been a success. I think this hero is impossible to balance. Either Shout is going to be broken and break the meta by making people all group up and stack up, or she's going to be weak. I think there is not enough nuance to the hero. Her axe, you hit people in front of you. Her knife, you pull people or do damage to people in front of you. You shout for yourself or for your teammates around you. Hello. And that's it. She's a close range brawl hero with a couple of key abilities, but not a lot of nuance in her abilities. Her DOT self-heal is basically worthless. The only time it's actually relevant is if you get a multi-man rampage, which never happens. Big Easy, thank you for the sub. Or her ultimate. That's the only time her self-healing is actually relevant. Her self-healing is the most irrelevant part of her kit. It doesn't matter. It's part of the nuance and dynamics that has flopped horribly. And what they've done recently is still doesn't change it. So this hero is fun to play, but has no dynamics whatsoever and is incredibly easy to completely shut down on hard counter. This hero I think is okay, but I still think that there's more dynamic to be do with here, right? And then there's this guy. What is this? Now, here's the thing. In terms of playstyle, there is some dynamics. For example, it's fun for me to coach a Roadhog because how you position versus the enemy comp does change. But then it still boils down to, are you going to hit the hook? Right? And then when you don't hit the hook or whatever, you press your E. Now, there have been some things. I think his ultimate is a little bit more nuanced. The fact that E has damage reduction isn't just a net buff. It also means that there's some different things that you can do with it. But that is a ridiculous kit to compare to somebody like Reinhardt or Orisa or Ramattra or Doomfist or Diva or Winston or Wrecking Ball or even Zarya. It's a joke. Where is the nuance? Where is the dynamic with this hero? It's not that he doesn't have a brawl, dive, or spam dynamic. That is only one aspect of dynamic. The other aspect that we talked about is simply the expansiveness of the kit. Now, people made fun of me on Twitter for saying this about Ramattra, and guess what? Ramattra is not OP. Or if he is OP, people are taking ages for people to figure out what actually makes him OP. It is not fun to be killed by a Roadhog. Why? Because it is a one-dimensional experience. And here's the other problem, chat. Same thing. Same thing. People don't talk about it, but basically the same thing. Too close of a thing. BAP has fun with healing and damage, but Immortality Field is not a very satisfying ability to use, and Shift is horrible. Horrible ability. Hate to be that guy, but you know it's true. Hate to be that guy, but you know it's true. And sadly, this guy too. Better than was before, but how many times have you guys played versus a Bastion and said, man, that was a nice shot from his sentry form, or man, that was a nice sticky grenade, or man, what a creative and cool use of his ultimate? No. You died to turret form, didn't you? And you felt annoyed at yourself for dying to turret form, didn't you? Right? And you can make arguments for other heroes as well. You can make arguments for the first design of Sombra, where she was just an assassination bot. No nuance at all, right? The current iteration of Widowmaker, which Widowmaker is tough because there is a lot of skill to playing her, but she isn't very nuanced, right? Venomine is one of the most least impactful abilities in the entirety of the game, as is Grapple. It's still important enough to coach, but it's not very impactful or dynamic. She's a very difficult hero, but pretty one-dimensional, right? Torbjorn, I'd argue, is more dynamic than you guys are giving credit for him, but still, it doesn't feel good dying to turret, right? Things like E. I mean, if you look at Torbjorn, what have you got? You got your turret, you've got your primary fire. They thankfully made his shotgun relevant, so that was a big deal. Remember when shotgun wasn't relevant? Torbjorn was very undynamic, but now at least his shotgun is relevant. E increases movement speed, and E increases fire rate, which means it can be used offensively or defensively. Now, I don't like turret, and I don't like his ultimate in terms of the dynamics, but at least it's better than what we thought. Still not great. Work needs to be done with both of these heroes, to be honest with you, but better. But you still see there's too many boxes here, right? Too many undynamic, one-dimensional heroes. And remember, we're not is far a dive or a spam hero. It doesn't matter. The hero is one-dimensional. You fly in the air and you shoot people. And you can't play the hero without a pocket of some way, shape, or form. Hanzo is similar to that as well. The only thing that saves Hanzo is that similarly to Torb, there is some dynamics about like how you use your Storm Arrow, how you use your Sonic properly, maybe using Lunge correctly, things like that. There's a little bit more movement. There's more agency with Hanzo than there is with Widowmaker. So we look at heroes like Genji. Why is Genji so strong? Is Genji a dive hero? Yes, but can Genji be played in Brawl? Yes. Can Genji be played in Spam? Yes. Is he optimal in those comps? Well, not always, but there is a lot of dynamics to how you use your deflect, how you use your wall climb, how you use your dash, how you position, how you use your Dragon Blade. Do you assassinate? Do you pressure? Do you control space? Same things apply to Tracer, who's very clearly a dive hero, but There's a reason why people pick Tracer a lot. It's because Tracer is not only a strong hero, but also Tracer, because their playstyle of mobility and dueling is so dynamic, there are a million situations in which you can use Tracer. You can be very flexible with Tracer. So there's too many heroes. And I hate as much as you want on how broken Sojourn is, but Sojourn is an excellent, excellent hero design. Thank you for the sub, Banathor.
Goated.
Because if you look at Sojourn, there is so much nuance to how she is played. Now, especially. Who you shoot, when you shoot, how you position, how to use your E, how to use your shift. It's fun. It's fun. Same thing here, right? Don't you use both Hanzo abilities off of cooldown? Mostly, sort of, kind of. Mostly. So, all that being said, I like the philosophy. I love the design philosophy, but there's a lot of work to be done for this philosophy to be properly executed, because there are some beautiful successes, even if you disregard balance. Sojourn, Orisa, Reinhardt, Winston. I know people are... Reinhardt probably needs some more work, but Winston, Orisa, even Ramattra is like is a hero that I'm hearing is a lot of fun to play, very dynamic. I didn't personally enjoy him, but there's a lot of dynamics to it. And I mean, even a hero like Lucio, right, who everyone thought for sure was going to be dead, his ability to move around, his ability to put, there's just so much dynamic to the way he played the hero. And then there's Moira, right? Then there's Moira. Then there's Roadhog. You know? Well, see, that's the thing. To me, having a dynamic and expansive kit does not mean a hero is broken. It depends on how strong those abilities are. Everybody looked at Ramattra's kit and was like, oh, he's broken because he can do this, and he can do that, and he can do this, and he can do that, and he can do this, and do that. And my point was that no, it depends on how well he does each of those things. Turns out, Ramattra's brawl potential isn't that crazy strong. Turns out, Ramattra's slow isn't that monstrously broken. Turns out, Ramattra's spam isn't as good as you think it is. So, is Ramattra okay? Maybe, maybe not. But just because you have an expansive kit doesn't mean you're broken. Brokenly powerful. My cat is trying to look out the window. Hi. There you go. There you go. Okay. But he just ends up underwhelming in every way. Well, that's where balance becomes really interesting, because what would happen, guys, if Ramattra's slow was on a slightly shorter cooldown and had a faster animation? What would happen if you increased Ramattra's projectile speed on his weapon by 5 meters per second? What would happen if you allowed Ramattra to heal off of the slow? In other words, when he uses his E, any damage that he does within the E, it's only 10 damage per second per target, right? But it was a self-heal on any of the damage that he done. Or let's say it's 50 damage per second. So it was like a Junker Queen type of bleed. What if with his ultimate, did not have infinite duration, it had a 10-second duration, but there was a 15 or 20% damage reduction of any enemy within it? What is my cat doing? So there was an actual damage reduction, but it was very weak. What if for every 100 damage that Ramattra blocked, he healed himself for 20? Now, I'm spitballing ideas that could be broken, could be useless, could be... But you see what I'm saying? There is so much to toy with here. So much to toy with. So many numbers. Right. Right, exactly. Exactly, Maelstrom. So that's my question. I don't know. And to me, I would much rather play a hero where there's changes like that than Roadhog hook cooldown increased by 1 second. Boring. Yeah, I don't like the permanent ultimate duration either. Even though it's probably the worst ultimate in the game, I don't like it either. So, I mean, that doesn't feel like you can. Here's the funny thing too: is like you can say something is unfun even if the hero is weak too. I think that's very fair. Could you do that with any tank? I mean, theoretically, but I think with Reinhardt, you toy more around with how fast the fire strikes travel, the cooldown of his charge, how fast he moves while he's shielding. You're very complicated saying remove hog, yes. Exactly, Simon, or Simone, exactly. Cassidy's sticky grenade. Well, here's the other thing. Okay, chat, what's the real problem with Cassidy's sticky grenade? Somebody tell me, what is the problem with Cassidy's sticky grenade? Somebody tell me. What's the real problem? This is a great, okay, you guys have learned from a moron like me, at least what I think. So you tell me what my problem with Cassidy's sticky grenade is. How do you use sticky grenade? Seriously, how do you use sticky grenade? Exactly. You press the button, and that's it. Something gets close, you press the button, that's it. There's no nuance. You don't have to choose who you go for, or what. As long as you don't throw it on a shield, just you use it. That's it. There's no counterplay. You just use it. So it's frustrating to die to, yes. But the reason why it's so frustrating to die to is because it's like, you know, he didn't use his brain. He just mashed the button. It's boring. It's boring. And the thing is, too, is it's like, as somebody who's played a little bit of Cassidy, maybe I'm just a normal, well-balanced human being, but I don't like using it. I mean, I'm going to use it but it's boring. It's like, I stuck. Okay, well, it doesn't feel good. It's not like I outthought them or I made a decision, or it just, I pressed the button and yeah. It's dull. You know? So it's not just the skill gap. It's also like, I feel like the grenade did the work for me, you know? Yeah. I don't know, guys. That's my thoughts on the whole thing. That's my thoughts on the whole thing. I like the design philosophy. We've talked a little bit about, I think, the patch notes and the patch changes are way too slow. Hopefully this has changed recently. But also, I'm just like, there's still a lot of work to be done. But I also don't want to be overly negative Nancy. I think that's a very common thing for a lot of pros and or content creators that get overly negative because all they do is play the game. But like, there are a lot of great things. Sojourn is a phenomenally designed hero. She's so much fun. She's so dynamic. There's a lot of nuance about her. You know, Orisa rework was successful. I think the Rein rework was successful. The Winston rework was successful. Nothing the rework, but the Winston buffs were successful. I think there were some frustrations about Zarya, but the problem with Zarya was the fact that she could bubble herself twice necessarily, but the fact that she could bubble two friendlies was really cool. I think there's some Ramattra as an overall. I think I don't enjoy playing him, but I do like the fact that he has a dynamic hero pool, and I respect things like Kiriko. Kiriko is a very, very good hero. The healing is too much, right? Kiriko is a great example of where we bring out the little bars, right? Kiriko does too much of both things, whether it's the mobility dynamics or the mobility and the dynamics, the utility, and the healing. She does too much in both. She gets to dip her hands in both. But like, I think she's a very interesting hero. So I applaud. We have to take the good with the bad, right? I think we should scream about Roadhog, cry, stomp our feet, knock down an Aaron. I almost said Aaron Kaplan, Aaron Keller's door, and be like, "What's going on, Aaron? Aaron, get rid of Hog! Get rid of Hog! Please, no more Hog!" Right? But then also recognize when things are good, right? Recognize, like, appreciate, give thanks, and be grateful for the good things too, right? So, if they keep up with 2 patches per season plus 2 hotfix balance patches, I would be totally fine with that. Did I also want to talk about role passives? I'm not going to, but I think what they did with the DPS. I don't have any complaints with the role passives anymore. The reload animation one is definitely a little bit imbalanced in terms of it affects some heroes and it's useless for other heroes. For example, Hanzo gets nothing out of it, but I don't have a problem with that. Like, honestly, like, it's fine. It's fine. The reload speed one is totally fine. I don't have a problem with it. I like the support passive. I like the tank passive. I like the damage passive. It's very inoffensive. So that's fine. I respect it. I was a big enemy of the movement speed for both sides. But I think now it's much better. Relay speed is fine. I think Bandit Throw, I think that's fine to do. Yeah, I think that's fine. As long as they're quick with the balancing. See, the problem here's what you guys are dealing with. Here's what you guys are dealing with. You guys are not allergic to Roadhog being okay. First off, to me there should be some blacklisted heroes, okay? I think Roadhog should never be meta. Never anything even remotely resembling meta, okay? I think that this hero should be blacklisted. I think this hero should be blacklisted. And I think to a lesser extent, maybe both of these heroes, maybe even this hero as well, should be blacklisted. And to a lesser extent, maybe this hero as well, but I'm less sure on that one. Blacklisted for sure. Blacklisted for sure. And then I'm kind of cool with the rest of them. But once you get rid of those nuances, I don't care if we have a Bat Brig meta again. And you have to pick, not have to, but Bat Brig are strong. The reason why you guys are all spooked is because most of you guys are Overwatch 1 players. And you had to deal with the dark days of 2019. I mean, really, since Overwatch's inception, Overwatch has a horrible track record of balancing. Not even in terms of creating a balanced game, because if you consider the end of Overwatch 1, I think the last year or so was pretty balanced, right? Most heroes were relevant. The good heroes were relevant. There wasn't like a hardcore had to play this meta. There's a lot of flexibility. However, it's flipping boring. And all the times previous to that, guys, do you remember goats? Do you remember how long it took them to fix goats? And how these... Okay, I'm going to say it. I'm going to be a negative Nancy for once. You guys ready? Hold on your butt cheeks, because Spilo is about to wet his pants saying something ugly and rude for once. How the idiots were buffing May and Reaper when we had a goats meta. Are you joking me? May and Reaper? The problem was sustain. The problem was not the DPS heroes needed to do these ungodly levels of damage. And of all the May and Reaper, are you kidding me? Idiot. Okay, that being said, we've all went through those days where it felt like they just were completely tone deaf with what was actually the issue. And then even when they did address the issues, it took them ages to fix it. Months. How long was Orisa meta, guys? For like 8 months, 9 months? For ages. And they didn't do anything. Now, I think a lot of this was because the resources were being put into Overwatch 2. I mean, who knows? You know, we don't know what's behind the curtain. But it's just for these heroes would just stay meta forever and forever. Brig just didn't go away oh my gosh, Brig was meta for ages, right? Brig was briefly not meta for a very brief period of time and then came right back in and was meta for another year, you know? And that to me is like where we're all spooked, okay? And I think we have a right to be kind of, I won't say ugly, but we do have a right to be skeptical because they do not have a good track record of balancing, because the problem with their balancing is not that they don't always get it right. I think it's fine where some things are overtuned, some things are undertuned, and we have a little bit of a back and forth, because first off, perfect balance is impossible, and second off, perfect balance is not always even optimal. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a variety, but the problem is those cycles just took forever. Guys, how long did they take them to nerf Zarya? We had one trick Zarya, because she was a little bit overtuned, for months. And that's not good for a first game. You know? And now we've got Roadhog. And now we're getting Roadhog nerfs, I think. But Roadhog was around for too long. Roadhog has been around for, 2 weeks now? 2.5 weeks? And not only that, but a horrible hero. Now, if we had an Orisa meta, or a Reinhardt meta, or a Winston meta for 2.5 weeks, maybe it's okay. But you also have to kind of use your brain a little bit here. And be like, hey guys, Roadhog sucks. People don't like Roadhog. We need to get this hero off of the thing. So to me, it's all about first off, recognizing that there should be a blacklist of heroes that should be meta. Roadhog should never be hard meta. But then also being more flexible on our time frame, right? Lucio should never be meta for months at a time, 4 or 5 months in a row. And yet here we are. Zenyatta hasn't been relevant since May or June. That's a problem, right? That's a problem. So as long as Blizzard is balancing things at a higher frequency and maintains a real attention on the blacklist of heroes, then we're good. And until heroes like Moira or Roadhog or Junkrat get reworks, they should never, ever, ever be meta. Ever. That's my honest opinion. Right, Shubu time. That's a great example of like associative balancing, where the Junker Queen meta. The best example of Blizzard crapping the bed with balancing was when they. First off, Junker Queen was a really boring meta to watch. I understand why they nerfed it. Okay, that probably was more for Overwatch League than for anything else. However, when they nerfed Brig and Spire, I was just like, oh, that was not an encouraging moment for me. When they nerfed Brig and Spire because of the Junker Queen meta. Brig and Spire. Brig was only played because she synergized perfectly with the heroes being played, even though she was clearly the weakest hero in that meta by far, and was still arguably the second weakest, if not the weakest support in the game at the time. But she just happened to fit really well with the composition, and yet they nerfed her. Junker Queen was the problem, / Sojourn was the problem, or even Lucio to a lesser extent, and yet Brig also got hit with the nerfs as well. That to me is the kind of stuff that takes me off, right? Like it's associative balancing. Like it's like the GOATS thing. Why is GOATS meta? It's not because DPS is too weak, it's because the synergy between sustain, ultimates, and objective was too strong. 2-2-2 had to happen.